Do you all remember the yellow brick road from the Wizard of Oz? It refers to that path where each brick or each step actually leads you closer to your hopes and dreams. I wonder where the yellow brick road of your hopes and dreams have led you. I wonder whether you're still resolutely moving forward on that road, whether you've sometimes stopped to think about where it's actually taking you, or whether you've possibly stepped off a time or two. So, are you someone who loves to skydive or whitewater raft, or did? Or are you someone who would rather sit at the same beach year after year, drinking the same drinks, with the same people, under the same umbrella every year? One of the surprises of living in Germany actually was that people love to go to the same places every year and do exactly that, year after year. For some reason, the certainty and the comfort were a high priority. Or maybe they didn't want to expend the energy to look at some other options. Their yellow brick road was always predictable, at least for one of their vacations for that year. As non-Germans in that country, it was foreign to us because we didn't have the history with all those places that they would book year after year, so we stepped off the path, off the beaten path. The speaker of that text that Robin read was actually Jesus. Once again, he takes very everyday, commonplace things and gives it a different twist, pointing out the obvious, but not really. He speaks about things that inevitably occur in every human configuration. Yes, murder, unfaithfulness in committed relationships, breaking oaths or breaches of contract or promises broken, revenge, and hatred. I suspect that none of us here this morning or watching on live stream would agree that these actions do not build community. And we can easily augment those lists to confirm our position. So, murder versus honoring life, severed relationships versus fidelity, duplicity versus reliability, revenge versus forgiveness, hatred versus love. It's obvious, isn't it? Left just like that, his hearers could endorse one and reject the other, leaving some of them feeling quite self-satisfied. Comparison always leaves one party feeling superior. Conformity to specific criteria fits so well into the comfort and predictability of the yellow brick road. But this is where Jesus takes it far beyond stating the obvious, thereby ejecting people from their comfort zone. In a sense, he removes that human option of comparison. So think of Jesus for a moment as a photographer who exchanges the telephoto lens for a wide-angle lens, almost as if he straightens up from a crouching position where he has dwelt on the minutia at his feet. He now wants to capture the entire landscape with all of its nuance and complexity. So in the same way, Jesus asks us to zoom out, to see the broader picture. He calls us to stop dwelling on the one narrowly defined deed. It's so easy to say, well, at least I didn't murder anyone today, while spewing obscenities and hatred wherever we go. It's equally easy to say, my religion is love, and yet talk behind somebody's back. It's relatively easy for us to say we can love our enemies if they're not too near us, if they're far away and they don't really have a face. But it's much more difficult to deal with a belligerent client or a defiant fellow citizen in a parking lot. It seems that's why Jesus uses the formulation, "You have heard that it was said, But I tell you, it's not either or, but it's something beyond what they have considered. He calls his followers out of predictable right and wrong thinking, taking it beyond the yellow brick road. So if we are filled with rage, we are on the same level as someone who has killed another person. If our actions and habits cause a rift in a committed relationship, we stand shoulder to shoulder with those who've betrayed a commitment outright. If we've failed to keep a promise, we and the one who's in court for breach of contract are actually quite similar. If we've whispered words under our breath like, would someone just take them out already? We share common ground with those who actually do take others out. You see what's happening here? Jesus paints this broad picture not to expand the judgment zone, but to show his followers that no one is superior. Mere compliance to a law makes for a feel-good experience. It's predictable and unencumbered progress along the yellow brick road. But that is not a transformative journey. Don't think I've come to abolish the law and the prophets. I've not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them, said Jesus. So what on earth does that mean? You either keep the law or you don't, right? Legal or illegal, honest or corrupt, trustworthy or devious. Presenting this wide-angle view depicts what Jesus meant by fulfilling the law and the prophets. In other words, showing that intent of the Hebrew Scriptures is what's important. What was intended by what had been recorded is what is critical. What are those faithful guidelines? It's much more cumbersome and time-consuming to discover and live out intent than it is to simply say, just don't do it, or just do it. Many of Jesus' hearers had embarked on that path a long time ago. They had been on that road for a long time. The religious leaders thought they could certainly handle it. They were on the yellow brick road and had actually put their whole lives in autopilot. And now they were trying their hardest to install that same app into everyone else's navigation system. So in this sermon, Jesus tells them that going through life on autopilot is not where it's at. It will snuff spiritual vitality out of people and out of institutions. We cannot find our way forward unless we are willing to ask ourselves those serious questions about how we interpret and live our faith. We cannot move forward effectively without asking the same questions of our institutions. Intent cannot be programmed into autopilot, nor can it be captured in a checklist. As we look at ourselves and our church community, our world stage even, how do we identify? With whom do we identify? Right or left? Aggressor or the subordinated? Progressive or conservative? Innovative or traditional? New or old? Inclusive or excluding? Religious or spiritual? Christian or syncretistic? Finding our place in a category isn't the most important thing. Asking how we got there is much more crucial. What has motivated us? What about the journey so far needs to be carried forward? And what is no longer useful and is actually holding us back? It's a well-researched fact that everyone comes to a point in life where nothing works anymore. Erevis shared very poignantly about that. Now, ironically, that point has often been called a midlife crisis, but for obvious reasons, which she was an example of, that's incorrect for a number of reasons. Number one, it does happen more than at midlife, and it does reoccur. And crisis seems to indicate a one-time experience, and then it's all over. It's more like an unraveling, according to Brene Brown. And this is not a fringe idea. It's been borne out in a lot of research, an unraveling. Faith communities and other organizations have similar defining moments. How will we weather an unraveling personally and as a community of faith? And I speak about it in person or in future terms because I know that we will meet that at some point because we already have. Your mind is going to go back to everything that worked. Everything from the things that carried you in dark times to things that gave you hope, to programs that used to work and draw crowds. And our human tendency is to plan to use those methods again. You have heard that it was said. Reminds us of where we've been and of our yellow brick road where that has led. But I tell you, calls us to reach for the wide-angle lens, to look far beyond, to capture the panoramic scene. Life will assuredly knock us to the ground individually and as a faith community. And if we're honest, we will all say, it already has. When it does so again, it's an invitation to look carefully at our beliefs, our traditions, our values, our ways of doing things personally, as well as a faith community. Jesus did not come to abolish the faith traditions that had brought his hearers to that point. He honored them, took them seriously, and used them as a launching pad upon which to build and from which to move forward. We don't have to tear up the yellow brick road that we've come on. We do now have the challenge to make the road by walking off of it into the unknown future. Unknown only in the sense of uncharted territory from our perspective. Do we dare step off the path? Do we dare extend that path out into the future that has been heavily influenced by unravelings already? If we say, yes, bring it, I ask the follow-up question, how will we then remain grounded in what Jesus said he did not come to abolish? That is, the solidity of our faith as Jesus followers. Later writers of Scripture who came after Jesus addressed that very thing, warning that we can easily lose our anchor and begin to drift. In the same breath, they call us to, and I quote, take our lead from Christ. It is he who keeps us in step with each other. Christ's breath and blood flow through us, nourishing us so that we will grow up healthy in God, robust in love. That's from the epistle to the Ephesians. It's not merely a checklist of do this and don't do that. It's not even a checklist of what we always do at various points of our annual calendar or our church calendar. We need to discern the intent. In other words, there has to be a why. Why do we do things, believe things, live the way we do? The why is a result of the intent. In other words, there has to be a why that is based on the road behind us, but not bound by the road behind us. Because the why of the future might look different than the why of the past. You have heard that it was said. But I tell you, oh, our road might still be yellow, but it may no longer be brick. We may need to replace the building materials. Do we dare? Or do we entrench, fighting against the inevitable unraveling as an enemy instead of a welcome friend? Jesus said, you have heard that it was said, but I tell you, extend the road. Go further, go deeper, and don't stop now. Certainty and comfort can no longer be a high priority. We will need to expend energy searching out new directions. Jesus invites us to zoom out, to see the broader picture. He calls us to imagine what's beyond the road that we've come on. Jesus always calls us to a transformative journey off the beaten track. This requires Spirit-inspired imagination. Jesus did not come to abolish, but he also didn't come to perpetuate robotic adherence to the known. He said, but I tell you, will we imagine? Will we extend the road further, going deeper into the future? That, my friend, is what moving beyond the yellow brick road is all about. May God help us.